So welcome to my review of Grandia, the High Definition Collection. Now this is on the Nintendo Switch. It is a remastered version of the original Grandia 1 and Grandia 2. Grandia 1 came out on the Sega Saturn, then to the PlayStation 1, and Grandia 2 was on the Dreamcast, and there was a not so hot port of it on the PS2. And before I get into this, I want to say I am a big fan of Grandia. If you type in Grandia on the channel, you will see that I've covered it over the years many times. I absolutely love it. So I was very excited that it's nearly 20 years later and Grandia is going to be introduced to a whole new generation with high definition graphics, with updated textures. How is it? The one thing I can say is I finished both of these games. I really like the storylines, but what I can do today is talk about some of the differences from the older games to these high definition remasters. Now I want to say these are coming to Steam as well, but the difference is compared to the Nintendo Switch versions, they're going to be sold separately. So they'll sell Grandia 1 separately and Grandia 2 separately, where on the Nintendo Switch you get both the games together. Now let's talk about the first one here. This was supposed to be, in Japan, the Final Fantasy VII killer. That's what Game Arts wanted it to be. It's a great game. A Final Fantasy VII killer? I don't know. I think it's a very interesting alternative, another RPG out there to play, and I enjoyed it for what it was. I really like the storyline, really like the characters, really like the graphics and the combat, and the music is phenomenal. But okay, so what have they changed from the older games to now? First of all, they've made it widescreen, and they've done a really good job. Even the intro sequence, which was never done in widescreen in any capacity, they've kind of done some tricks, and they've made it look pretty good. I was like, wow. And it just starts off, and once I saw Grandia, the title, super high res in 1080p, I was like, this is quite exciting. And then I started to play the game, and what were some of the things I noticed? They've used like a texture filter on this, on the graphics here, on the character sprites. What do I think of that? It's like one of those old filters where it kind of smudges some of the colors together. But I will say, I was not offended by it. When I was playing it, I thought, this is pretty good. This looks good. And also, the backgrounds in which your characters run around in look really nice. The textures have all been redone and they look stunning. It was really amazing when you first get into the world and it's scrolling around, and you gotta understand, this is a game from 20 years ago, and I was like, this looks really, really good. I couldn't believe it. And then I got into combat, and that looked amazing, and yes, they use some filters, but they're not offensive. I thought they were quite well used, and for such an older game, I think they've done a pretty good job here. And also, the creators of the game, in going in and remastering it, said they sat next to the Saturn version and compared it all to make sure it was as close to the Saturn version, because the Saturn version is the best version. The version that was released in Japan, we got a PS1 port of that, which was kind of a bit inferior. It was missing a little bit of animation. Still good. That's the one I played. I was not upset when I played that, but they've done a lot of work to honor the originals. Now, the default language is English, and I gotta say, because that's the way I originally played it, I love the voices, and they're not good, some of them. They're horrendously bad, but that's what creates some of the charm for Grandia.
I keep telling you, Mullen. When there are no soldiers around, you should call me father.
Excuse me, but Lieutenant Lean is still here.
It really reminds me of the late 90s anime dubs and how some of them could be really good and some of them were a little off. Grandia is a mix of both of those, so there's some really good voice actors in there, and there's some others that are really playing it up a little too much, and it comes off as cheesy. But oh my god, for me personally, the nostalgia, hearing Justin, it's just wonderful to hear again. But I also saw an option in there to change it to Japanese. I didn't play with that, I just stuck with the English. Now, a lot of you out there are saying, John, honestly, is this worth coming back to 20 years later? You know, some of you out there have never played the game. Is it worth playing? Is it an RPG that deserves your attention? I was sitting on the couch playing it this afternoon, and I obviously was whelmed with emotion and nostalgia when I originally played it 20 years ago. And when I was playing this, though, the one thing I can honestly say, all of my friends, my immediate friends, have finished Grandia. We all loved it. So take it for how that is, that all my friends at the time, we all finished the game, and we all talked about it. We're still talking about it 20 years later. I think there's a lot to love here. This is a story of innocence, of a bunch of kids that grow older through the story, and you grow kind of with them. Yes, it's kind of long-winded in some of the dungeons. Like, during the middle parts of the game, you're like, another dungeon, more monster grinding. But that's a product of the time, so do expect that. That is there. But there's a fun storyline there. The music, I've got 2 double CDs in the other room of the music for Grandia. It is excellent. It's almost worth playing the game just to listen to the music and hear the combat music and just running around in fields. Really great stuff. And I'll quickly get into the second game. The second game was released on the Dreamcast. It's a really great RPG as well. How is this version? I was quite impressed playing it, looking at some of the polygons and some of the high-res, obviously 1080p graphics now, and also it's 16:9 as well. I sat there and I was like, it almost seemed like a brand new fresh game to me, because I played it on the Dreamcast, on the standard definition TV. Even if I played with S-Video back then, it looks really great now. The only one thing that I will say about Grandia 2 that I did notice was the music's all good, the texturing's really nice, but sometimes with dialogue, when your character's on the screen for dialogue, the profile picture of that character is a little bit low res. And what I did hear about the conversion when they were doing it, they're doing it from the PC version of the game, is that some bits they couldn't extract. So some bits are kind of like hard-coded in there, so they couldn't take them out and update them, but everything else has been really given a facelift. And if you thought Grandia 1 was good, Grandia 2 is phenomenal. I'm a little partial to Grandia 1 myself. There's a little bit more nostalgia there. I enjoy the music a little bit more, but don't underestimate Grandia 2, a really excellent game. It's so strange to get to this time in my life. I was 25 when I played Grandia. I was 26 when I played Grandia 2. And here I am, it's 20 years later, I'm 45 now. It's really amazing how that happened. And I've got a little bit more to say about Grandia, and I want to speak about Grandia 1 here for a little bit. The reason why I love this game and the nostalgia is so deep for me is it was the last game that I played at my parents' house in the basement before I moved out. And such nostalgic memories of finishing the game. And I remember I was surrounded by boxes because my mom and sister were moving to the other side of Canada. I got myself a place, and it was like, wow, it was the end of an era. And that's, I'm not saying anything, but the end of Grandia 1 is so nostalgic and so sad in a lot of ways. It's bittersweet. And it really reminds me of kind of my innocence, kind of moving on to a different time in my life. And Grandia is shaped in that youth of that kid back then who played all of the RPGs in his parents' basement and loved every second of it. And then what happened is, about a year later, I went to Anime Expo, walking around at night, and you've seen it. I've shown this before in the show many times. I'm going to show it again because it's the right time. I'm walking around the Disneyland Hotel in the year 2000, Anime Expo, and all of a sudden we see all the guests of honor. And I'm introduced to, I sit down with the character designer of Grandia, and we sit with a translator and talked all night. We were drinking beer, smoking cigarettes. One of those moments that I will never, ever forget. And what's even more crazy, I've never mentioned this before, that the monster designer, the angel designer of Evangelion, was right there with us as well. And he did a sketch as well. Oh my god, it's so cool to hang out with those guys. And what a crazy memory. And I'm so glad I had the camera out. I was a much skinnier guy. And then a couple of days later, I ran into the character designer of Grandia. Oh my god. And I got him, it's finally in a frame, folks. I got him to draw me the main character from Grandia, Justin. And this is a true treasure that I will own for the rest of my life. I've already had this for nearly 19 years. And where did the 19 years go? Where did the years go since Grandia 1? It's just flown by like nothing. And here I am 20 years later. But the one thing I can say is I'm happy that I am here 20 years later and I still get to talk about Grandia. I still get to play an updated Grandia in the other room, and it totally warms my heart, makes me feel so great. And you know, I'm starting to think, is there going to be a physical copy of Grandia in the future by Strictly Limited Games or Limited Run? I don't know. Time will tell, but I can honestly say this is a really great collection of games to get. You're getting 2 games for the price of 1. They've done a really good job. I can't say enough. I'm really thrilled to play Grandia again 20 years later. So anyways, guys, until next time.